Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Indaba Africa. This is Chris Wyatt coming to you from Central Pennsylvania. And today on another special feature, I have a guest. Our guest is Phil Craig, and we'll be talking about Cape secession. Yeah, that's right, Cape secession. An issue that those of you who pay attention to my channel, I've been a little bit skeptical of this, and so we've brought someone on who's involved in this effort, and we're going to talk to him in just a moment. But before I do, I'd like to just briefly introduce the topic of the Cape Independence Advocacy Group so that people are more familiar with it. But welcome for tuning in, whether you find yourself in South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Nigeria, Ghana, New Zealand, Hong Kong, or Singapore, Canada, U.S. Now I'm finding out people are watching this stream from Hong Kong and Singapore. It's quite interesting. But the Cape Independence Advocacy Group was formed in 2020, so it's a recent creation to coordinate and support people and organizations working towards Cape independence. Of course, if you're curious, we're talking about the Western Cape and perhaps more, but we'll get to that in the discussion. The group's primary goal is bringing about a referendum in the Western Cape with the end goal of secession from South Africa and forming a new sovereign state. That's interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about the history of how that's gone well and not gone well for some countries, with a government that better represents the people of the Cape of Good Hope. So I suspect that maybe the new country will be called the Cape of Good Hope if it happens, and we'll just call it colloquially the Cape. Through awareness campaigns, advocacy, and lobbying, the group aims to unite the citizens of the Cape with a clear and focused message to build a support base among the various communities that call this region of the world their home. The group is committed to democratically, lawfully, and peacefully obtaining independence for the collective peoples of Western Cape. And without, my guest today is from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, and his name is Phil Craig. Some of you may be familiar with him. But before I bring him on, let me reduce the size of my camera because I am not the focus of the session. We're going to bring it in. Put myself over here in case anybody decides to super chat so we can still see. For those who notice, I've turned the super chat feature on, and I actually like it because the Mahalisberg is my backdrop on my channel. And the zombie appears, it looks as if he's climbing the Mahalisberg to reach the peak. So it's kind of interesting if you super chat or if you do the super sticker. Anyway, so you're welcome to do that. Please feel free to ask your question as we go throughout. Phil can't see the questions on his end. It's just a conversation for him. So I'll try to keep track of the questions. And if you do a super chat, I'll make sure that we get your comments in here. So with that, I'm going to bring him in just now. So Phil, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's my pleasure. Well, Phil, could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start talking about secession, before people start losing their crap?
Sure. Okay. So actually, I'm British by birth. I moved out to South Africa in 2004. I ended up marrying a South African woman, and I've been here now for 16 years in the Western Cape. I've done a number of things, but essentially I'm an entrepreneur, but found this really as South Africa itself has started to take the wrong route and to regress. Then really with the interests of my family and friends and my sort of fellow citizens, have a passion for sort of what's the right way to say, saving the Western Cape from South Africa. South Africa is not following a route that we want to go on, and if they are going to shoot themselves in the foot and destroy a wonderful country, that'll be tragic. But we're pretty determined that they're not going to take us with them.
Well, before we really get deeply into that, again, you went to South Africa. What was the reason you went, and what drew you there?
So, look, like often things that I once heard years ago, and I can't remember who it was. I wish it was. It was somebody quite famous, and it was interviewed when I was in the UK. It was back in the days of radio, and they were talking to this person, and whoever they were absolutely the top of their field. And the interviewer said, well, yeah. So how long was this a dream of yours? You know, was it something that you sort of childhood was a dream and you pursued your whole life? And whoever it was came with the most memorable reply because it just described me in many ways. And he said, listen, my life just followed the course of least resistance, and I think that describes me. That I'm somebody who, if I would say my greatest skill as an individual is wherever you put me in whatever circumstances, I'll be all right. I'll find a way of thriving and enjoying myself. I had quite a big business in the UK that was growing and growing and growing, and it just completely consumed my life. And I just decided that enough was enough, and I wanted to make a change. I was a passionate rugby player at the time, and decided that we were going to go do something completely different. So we were looking for countries where we could speak English, where we get a fair bit of value for our pounds, and where they played rugby, so I could keep on playing rugby. So the list was South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. I always had a fascination with South Africa. It turned out later that my deceased father, I didn't know at the time, had also had a fascination and a passion for South Africa, and so I ended up here, and I believe that was where I was meant to end up. And it's been a challenging but a thoroughly wonderful experience, and I don't regret 1 second of it.
Well, that's excellent. I guess there's two comparisons here, two analogies we can say. By the way, Phil, he saw me briefly on camera, but he doesn't see me now. I am wearing a Western Province rugby jersey today. That is kind of my theme. I always wear a rugby jersey of some sort, and I've got about 75 or 100 of these things in my closets. So, and I'm a Stormers Western Province fan. So even if the secession does take place, I'll remain a Stormers and Western Province fan. But anyway, but what I was going to say, two analogies. It's almost like your life is kind of like commerce and water. My point being that commerce will always find a way. People will always find a way to trade. Just look at the illicit cigarette trade taking place in South Africa today, despite the lockdown. So commerce will find a way, and water always finds a way. So that's kind of your life. You go where it takes you, and you find a way. So I guess that's an apt analogy for your life.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll remember that one too.
So in the stream, very quickly, let me just say hello to some folks, because we got some the usual suspects here. We're looking for Kaiser Sose, in case you're wondering. But in the usual suspects, we've got a number of folks we see here: Rudy Roo, Elizabeth, HBM Air, El Bono, Pete Buttons, The Right, Reverend Rawhide, which is kind of a cool username, Sean Mondich, The Wizard, UCN. Welcome back, UCN. Good to see you here. I think UCN is in Hong Kong, actually. And the Lone Wolf, Bobby B, Bite Your Ankles, Wesley. Thank you all for tuning in. The number of people tuning in now is climbing. I should mention that when I do the special features, I don't play Giselle's music at the start. So I think some people are getting conditioned to my live streams in which I play Giselle's music videos. So they're like, oh, I got 3 minutes before we start talking. Nope, for this, we actually get right into it. That's the first thing. The other thing is that Lone Wolf said something in here. He said he's still watching the Wonder Bra advert, and said good subscribers will watch ads as this generates more income for streamers. Well, thank you very much, Lone Wolf. But for these live streams, folks, don't feel obliged to follow those adverts. Go ahead and click and skip it if you like, so you don't miss the conversation. That's really there for the prepared videos, and that's the one. If you're inclined to help out, support the channel, that asks that you actually let them play in the background, even if you don't watch them. But I've tried to set the adverts up so they don't annoy people. I don't have any adverts that pop up in the middle of a stream when you're watching a video, because someone's in the middle of a conversation and suddenly you're watching a Wonder Bra ad. Not cool. Anyway, so back off from that. Okay, so Phil, if you could tell us a little bit about why Cape Secession and how you came to this. I mean, this group is just 2020. So tell us this, and then we'll ask a question about what the group really is. So why now, and how did you come to this conclusion?
So, well, look. So I guess like a lot of people in South Africa. So first of all, I'm a pragmatist, not an idealist. So I didn't have this long held passion that I definitely wanted an independent Cape. We just things started to go progressively worse and worse in South Africa, and it was clear there wasn't going to be a solution, and therefore at some point you have to stand up yourself and start to be that solution. I look as things have gone bad. Look, I don't know how much of your audience is South African and not, but as things in South Africa have started to go progressively worse under the ANC, because they're progressive, they're following socialist policies that have failed in lots of places and will fail here too. Often then the government starts to resort increasingly to populism, which is what's happened in South Africa. And I think so. I'd always kind of felt that secession probably was a natural counterpoint. So the more that South Africa became racially nationalist, which is the route that it's going, the Western Cape, which has a completely different demographic mix and mix of cultures and ethnicities, was likely to follow the route of secession. And because clearly if you are going to have a racially nationalist policies, and you have a territory where the majority of the people would be at the wrong end of those policies, they're going to rebel against that. That hasn't really happened. South Africans are kind of take a lot of things in stride. We've definitely got a front. So people kind of roll with the punches and which is pretty well. Yeah. then look, I'm not particularly was in church a couple of times at the tail end of last year, and on both occasions the two different ministers were both of them said, look, you know what, kind of, yeah, God has got a plan, but actually he expects you to get off your bum and the second time I went and spoke to my wife, who's much more religious than I, and the reason why I was in church is really 2020 is the year that I've got to go and do something. You know, what do you think? Obviously, it's going to affect us as a family. And I think it's right. It's a calling you and do it, and so that's how we kind of started. I then contacted of existing groups in the Western Cape, and we worked for a short time alongside.
All right, Phil, if you're
really,
hey, Phil, let me stop you. Phil, can you hear me? Let me stop
nobody really thought we wanted to tick. There were some great people, organizations, and we still work with those organizations, but I had a bit of a different.
Phil, can you hear me? Yeah, your connection is all messed up here. What I'm going to suggest is this. What I'm going to suggest is this. Yeah, you keep. What I'm going to suggest is, why don't you hang up and I will call you back, because almost everything you said was just broken up there. Everyone seems to think they can't follow it. So I'll call you right back and bring you right back into the stream in just a minute. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, folks, ladies and gentlemen, what's happened here is that the connection problem is on Phil's end. It's not my internet. He's had bad data connection. That's one reason why he's not watching the stream. So I'm going to give it a second. I'll call Phil back up and see if we can get him back in. My apologies. It's not lagging. It's not a problem with the feed. It's a problem with his data connection on the South Africa side. So he's having a bad connection at his place. So I'm going to call him back in just a second. My apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. But let's I'll get him back up here in just a second. And we'll get him back on. So anyway, I'm really sorry about that, but I don't control the mobile networks or the ISP providers in South Africa, and this does happen for those of you in South Africa. You're very well familiar with this. If it's not load shedding, it's mobile networks not being reliable or your ISP having trouble with the West African cable system. Anyway, I'll bring him back in just a moment. Yeah, BEE Internet. There you go, Ultimate Sharpshooter. Yeah, his connection was dodgy, so I'm going to try to call him back and get him back in here in just now. Let's see what happens, okay? Let me see if it gets better. So be patient with me, folks. Hang in there. I'll call him sound only. Yeah, I could do that. Let me do that. Okay, yeah. That's a good idea. Let me the darn red ants. Kyle does a super chat and he points out the red ants are involved. That's good. Hey Phil, I've got you. I've just got you on audio. Do you mind if I just put you up on audio, or should we try the video again? Can you hear me? Phil? Hello, Phil?
No audio.
Okay, all right. So, okay, I can see you now, but let me see if I can get you back screen. If we lose the video again, oh, it's not coming. There you are. There you are. Okay. Can you move your hand or something? It looks like a frozen screen. It is a frozen screen. All right, this isn't going to work with the video, it looks like, isn't it? No, it keeps freezing out. It keeps freezing out. So why don't we just go to audio and see if it works? Okay, I'll turn your camera off, Phil.
Okay, camera's off.
Okay, all right. I gotta drop it there. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Phil back now. Apologies for the red ants and their tearing down of formal and informal structures, apparently now in the Western Cape somewhere. Phil, welcome back. So, are you there?
Well, thank you, Chris.
All right, so yeah, what we were talking about was all of that stuff I asked you about, how you got into it, why 2020, and let me just paraphrase what I could hear, and then you can fill in the gaps, what we missed. So basically, you were saying that things were on a negative trajectory. You're very concerned. You're worried about what was happening, and you said this is the time to do it. Your wife, who's a person of faith, thought that was important to do, and that's kind of what we got. Did we catch enough of that, or did we miss something?
No, I think that sounds like you've got the gist of the story there. So yes. Then I arrived in 2020, talked to a few of the existing groups, got linked up with some like-minded people. Nobody quite fitted the bill of what we wanted to achieve, so we started our own organisation, and here we are.
And how large is your organization? Do you have a feel for that? It's brand new, so I mean, I don't imagine it's that large, or is it?
Yeah, so look, we've made quite staggering progress in some ways. So actually, in terms of the team, so then we're about 15 strong. So we're not looking to be a big team because we're a lobby group rather than an activist group. But in 4 weeks, we've got about 4,200 followers. From a standing start, which is fairly significant, and we've had a couple of really big wins. We've got an unusual strategy, very different to the other groups. We've drawn comment out of the government of the Western Cape, the Democratic Alliance. They had a policy of silence, and actually, we one of our big strategies was to get them to break that silence, and that has happened. We've had 2 or 3 articles published in the mainstream media now. It's been 4 weeks since we launched our website. We obviously have been planning before that, and we've had some real big wins. So I think probably the timing is very good with lockdown, but I think this is an idea that's finding its time.
All right, so just so you know, Phil, what I've done is I've put your photograph up on the screen. So while your image is not there with live video, your face is on the screen, so people at least get an image of what you look like and have an idea who we're talking to. So that's up there. So actually, I'm kind of envious, Phil. I have to say, I mean, in just a little over a month, you've got 4,000 folks involved. I just crossed the 3,000 subscriber point after 2 months, so I feel like I'm falling behind. But to be fair, I'm not advocating for the creation of an independent nation, so maybe that's my shortcoming. Perhaps I should seek out the goal, that my lifelong goal, to be a benign dictator in a small African country. If the Western Cape secedes, maybe I could be there. I had Lesotho and Swaziland in mind, but perhaps the Western Cape might be my ultimate destination.
Well, I can tell you it's the most wonderful part of the world, and people that come here, look, there's a lovely expression. You'll get it from your time in Africa. They say, once you get African dust on your feet, you can't ever probably remove it. And I think that's how I feel about the Western Cape and Africa, and it's a wonderful place to be.
Well, I will say I agree, and in all my experiences, Western Cape and Stellenbosch and Paarl and Franschhoek and Hermanus and Cape Town, Hout Bay, all those places, the only beef I have with the area is that damn cable car. You know, I've been to Cape Town so many times, and it took me 20 years to get to the top of Table Mountain because every time I went, the cable car was down for repairs.
But Chris, walk. The walk up and down is the most spectacular part. With your background, you can just leave the cable car, go to the botanical gardens, Kirstenbosch Gardens, walk up Skeleton Gorge. It'll be the best experience of your walking life in South Africa. It's a stunning walk, and you walk across the top of Table Mountain. Then you can, if you're lazy, you can get the cable car down, or you can walk down Plattekloof Gorge so you can go up, across, and down. And it's stunning.
No, those are great points, and one day, perhaps now that I'm left active service, I have some time for it. But as you can imagine, each time I've been there, I've been short and pressed for time, so it's doing that sort of thing has not been feasible. But I did finally get up there, and wow, what a stunning view from up there, as everyone who's ever been up there knows. It was interesting, though, because it was late in the day, and a few of the security folks walked around because I was about away from the crowd. You know, it's quite large up there. You can walk quite a ways. And a couple of fellows cautioned me to be careful. And I said, it'll be all right. Don't worry. I'll be fine. But yeah, no, I've had that. I appreciate that. People on occasion look out for your welfare when you're in South Africa, when you're traveling, you're a tourist. It's obvious they try to make sure that you're safe. And it's much appreciated because you don't need that kind of nonsense tourists being attacked. But all right, so the group, the Cape Advocacy Group here, you guys are based in Cape Town or Stellenbosch, or where are you based out of?
We are no. So look, I'm based in Wellington, which is close to Paarl, which would be the second biggest city in the Western Cape. But if I talk about our executive committee on there, then we're literally international. We've on our committee we've got people from upcountry, and we've got people from in Switzerland. Our leader actually stays in Switzerland. He obviously is a South African guy that emigrated, would love to come back. Where the circumstances are right, but we're based. Let's say we're based in Paarl. That's where I am, and that's kind of the hub, I guess.
All right, that's excellent. I guess the questions are coming in now. So first off, once again, thank you, Kyle, for the super chat and pointing out that the red ants are probably, it's a running joke in case you don't know, Phil. When I first started streaming a couple months ago doing the live streams, my connection kept breaking, and I would get like 30, 40, 50, 70 people tuning in. I was like, wow, this is awesome. And then boom, my connection would disappear, and I couldn't figure out what it was. In the end, it was something to do with my router here. I changed my network card. Finally, I just stopped using my laptop and switched over, and that didn't fix it. So I finally just hooked up the LAN connection, and since then I don't have a problem. But it's so the running joke is, of course, that the red ants under the Johannesburg Metro Police had come out to take down my informal settlement. So in the midst of coronavirus, no less. So here's a question here from Elizabeth. I think it's a very good question, and it'll help get us into the topic of secession in the Cape. And she asked, and I know the answer to this, but I want you to share it with the audience. She asked the question, so secession, is this just for the Western Cape, or what about the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape?
So, look, the starting point is the Western Cape. Yeah, there are good reasons for that. Most significantly, it's for a country to secede, there must be a defined territory, there must be a defined people, and there must be a political authority. And we've obviously got the Western Cape border is established. There is a Western Cape government, and obviously there's a permanent population in the Western Cape. So that's the starting point. But ultimately, our mission is 100% based around democracy and the will of the people. So therefore, once we get to the point where we're having a referendum and there's going to be a separate country, clearly there's going to be discussion from people along that border. And because we're totally committed to a democratic solution here, it may well be that people on the outside of that border want to be included, and if at a municipal level the majority want to be included, then we'd like to see that happen. And likewise, there may be people inside the Western Cape that perhaps don't want to be included at a municipal level. And as long as they're adjacent to the border and we can redraw the border by democracy, then that's great. And in real terms, it's a slightly lazy way to look at it. But in terms of how people lean, people either kind of lean to the ANC and a socialist sort of vision, or they lean to the DA with a more free market capitalist vision. And if you look at the electoral map, the Western Cape obviously traditionally always votes DA, or has done for the last 3 terms. And the southernmost portion of a large portion actually of the Northern Cape and the western portion of the Eastern Cape are also traditional DA voters. So it's highly likely that the ultimate border would be a little bigger than the Western Cape, but the starting point is very definitely the Western Cape.
So it's possible potentially say that the Western Cape became an independent country, that in future they would entertain if another province of South Africa would be interested in leaving, that maybe they could join a confederation or that republic. Is that a possibility? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be at provincial level because there's no other provinces that reject the ANC government in the way that the Western Cape has. But I think there'll be portions. So obviously South Africa's broken up into smaller and smaller systems. So you've got the province. Within the province, you've got a district. Within the district, you've got municipalities. And I think at municipal level, the municipality level, that is the level that So for example, the border's now drawn. There's South Africa and there's Western Cape. You sit in a municipality where 75% of the people don't want the ANC to be government, and they want the DA to be government. Now the DA is the government of the Western Cape. Then those people, providing they had a referendum and that was the democratic will of the people, would have a very strong case to say, well, look, we want to be included in the new country. So I don't think it'll be at provincial level, but at municipal level, I think that border will be adjusted depending on what people want.
All right, that's interesting. So for those just tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Phil Craig. And he is with the Cape Advocacy Group. Make sure I get the proper title for it. So it's the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. And we're talking about possibility of secession for the Western Cape and what that entails. How, we haven't got to yet if it's been done elsewhere, how it succeeded or failed. But you're not seeing him live on the stream because the internet feed on his end is having challenges. And so we have him audio only. I'm Chris here in Central Pennsylvania. So welcome into the stream. I mention this because we just surged the number of people coming in to watch the program. So Phil is talking to us about this topic. Now, Tion asked a good question here before we get any further, Phil. And he said, so what about the rest of South Africa? And that's actually a question I want to get into a little bit detail later on, but I didn't want to miss that point now. So what about the rest of South Africa? If the Cape secedes, what happens to the rest of South Africa? Do you leave them behind?
Okay, so, well, ultimately, I guess the answer is yes. Look, I think there are benefits for South Africa, but I mean, again, our whole thing is this is about democracy. It's about what the people want. So ultimately, we live in the Western Cape. The people of the Western Cape have repeatedly expressed their democratic wishes in the national elections. They're there. They're a matter of record. And the people of the Western Cape don't want to be governed by the ANC. They don't want the ANC's policies, and they don't want the ANC's conduct. And that is a matter of record. For those that don't know, currently the ANC government sets all of the policies for the Western Cape, but they only have 28% of the vote. So you've got the party with 28% of the vote is setting all of the policies, and the party with 55% of the vote is having to follow the policies set by the party with 28% of the vote. And obviously that isn't how democracy is supposed to work. The trouble with the rest of South Africa is that the ANC is the legitimately elected government of South Africa, and they've currently got 59% of the vote in South Africa, including the Western Cape. If you take the Western Cape out of that, then their number goes well above 60. And if you add in the kind of offshoot, effectively, I'm going to call them the EFF, and you put the two together, then the socialist, African nationalist and socialist parties, between the two of them, they've got 73.1% of the vote in the rest of South Africa. So South Africa arguably has got the government it wants and it voted for. And however bad I may think that government is, and I think it's pretty bad, I do respect that it's the genuinely elected government of South Africa. So long as they're electing the government and getting the government they want, there's not much that we can do. We potentially can offer olive branches to people from South Africa who would want to come and stay in the Western Cape, and I think that's something that that's a possibility. And then we kind of hopefully at least can become a beacon of hope for South Africa, and a kind of a demonstration that the problems that South Africa are facing aren't all the legacy of apartheid and colonialism, but actually they are self-inflicted by the government. And I think once the Western Cape is independent and starts to perform significantly better than South Africa, which if it becomes independent it will inevitably do, then that will be beneficial to South Africa in terms of a demonstration of where the fault actually lies.
Now, interestingly enough, the Democratic Alliance, of course, which is the party that's been ruling Western Cape, as you said, for some period of time now, has been very mute on this topic until recently, when John Steenhuisen commented on the issue of secession. And you wrote an open letter to him on Cape Independence, saying Cape Independence is feasible, an open letter to John Steenhuisen. And in it, you brought up 4 issues about whether secession is legal, the issue of financing or taxation, whether it's a question of hope or not, and then the whole last point I think Steenhuisen made about not being an outsider or something like that. But so these 4 points that you raised with John Steenhuisen, could you talk a little bit about those? First off, what's the legal basis for secession? I mean, is it even legal?
Yeah, so yes, it is, and that has increasingly become clear over the last few years. Look, like anything in terms of law, that there will be varying opinions. But I think one of my favourite quotes is a guy called Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank actually was based in New York. He was a German by birth, and then he went to Canada, and he ended up in New York. But he was a constitutional and international law expert. One of the things actually the Canadian government asked him for advice with regard to Quebec secession, and he gave and a part of the advice he gave is there, and I'm quoting him now: "There is a privilege of secession recognized in international law, and the law imposes no duty on any people not to secede." So the sort of starting point for this is that if a country wants to be, if a people want to be their own people in a country, then there's no law stopping that. They're entitled to do that. And then further than that, you can go further. When Kosovo wanted to, at the end of the violence there, when it was kind of tidied up in the first instance, Kosovo wanted to leave Serbia. And Serbia didn't want Kosovo to leave. And actually, both sides then referred the matter to the International Court of Justice in The Hague in 2010. And the International Court of Justice said there's no prohibition on the declaration of independence. So, and they advised that Kosovo was perfectly entitled to declare itself an independent country, and then obviously then you get down into whether that declaration is recognized or not. And in Kosovo's case, Germany and the United States recognized Kosovo, and Kosovo became an independent country. So in terms of legal, it's absolutely legal. It's more about the process, and obviously there are countries that have walked that route in a gentlemanly fashion, and obviously there are countries where it's been bloody and disastrous, we clearly do not want the second, and we desperately want to have the former. But in terms of the legality, there is no question that secession is legal. Now it's beyond doubt.
Well, Phil, we're at the bottom of the hour, so let me just do a little bit of housekeeping here very quickly. So, folks, thanks for tuning into this special feature Sunday live stream. My guest today is Phil Craig, who is with the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, advocating for secession from South Africa, Republic of South Africa. And we have him on voice only, having a bit of an issue with data on his end. And so you're seeing me, and you're seeing a photograph of Phil there, nice photograph. But we're talking about Cape secession, and a lot of questions are coming in. Now, I should point something out, Phil, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the United Nations is founded on the concept of self-determination, in large part as a consequence of the Second World War and the issues going on with ethnic minorities all across Eastern Europe between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. And additionally, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights does call for self-determination in it, and South Africa is a party to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Did I get that wrong?
So, look, the honest answer is I don't know. Whether you got it right or wrong, I'm not a legal expert. I think, look, self-determination is a right allowed by the United Nations, I think, in the Statute of Rome. There were earlier discussions, because I know they talked about the definitions in Montevideo in 1933. But yes, the United Nations makes self-determination a human right. The African Union has a clause on there. Even South Africa has a clause in its constitution on self-determination. So yes, people have a right to self-determination. Obviously, when you're talking just about self-determination, then there's a conflicting right, which is obviously the right of the parent country to territorial integrity. So when you sort of get into the detail of the law, there are some conflicting rights, but that's more about how they play out in terms of international law. I think it's now broadly accepted. There are some people that dispute it, but it's broadly accepted that secession is legal, and the case for it has got stronger and stronger and stronger, and more countries have seceded.
No, Phil, I didn't mean to put you in a legal spot. It's true, you're not an attorney, but in fact, those are true statements. I was just bringing it up for the sake of conversation so that people are more familiar with the fact that South Africa is a party to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the founding base of the USM was on the basis of self-determination. That was one of the key factors. But the other piece of this, too, the complication, is that the Organization of African Unity, excuse me, and its successor, the African Union, have always stood on the principle that states are indivisible. Now, there's a bit of hypocrisy there, because they allowed for the separation of Eritrea from Ethiopia at one stage, and then later allowed for the division of Sudan into North and South Sudan, as well as, even though it's not internationally recognized, the AU essentially treats Western Sahara as an independent country now, which is a whole odd conundrum with Morocco now part of the AU. But so the AU and the OAU are all over the place on this. But as far as what you've said here, it does appear that you have a legal basis for a secession. So the next question, I think John Steenhuisen, his opposition to it was that financially viable. And I read your op-ed, and you laid out quite well. So can you discuss that issue?
Sure. So John then made a comment. So it was interesting. Obviously, John was caught slightly off the cuff and on a podcast himself, and therefore had presumably come with I guess his preconceptions around independence and probably not researched fact. So he made the statement that effectively the Western Cape, were it to be independent, would be one of the most taxed regions in the world. The inference being that the tax burden in the Western Cape would rise. But in actual fact, all the evidence that we have, and that's coming from the South African government itself, the National Treasury, and an organisation called Stats SA, who are the sort of the keeper of stats in South Africa, show quite the opposite. So effectively, the Western Cape is a net contributor to the South African fiscus. The Western Cape houses 11.2% of the South African population, but it produces 13.9% of South Africa's GDP, and 15.4% of all taxpayers live in the Western Cape. So first of all, from the 11% of the population, they're producing between 14 and 15.5% of its income. But then when the money is allocated back, so because of the system in South Africa, that money then is paid to national government, and then they allocate a portion back to each of the provinces. So the portion that's allocated back to the Western Cape is 10.1%. So on a GDP levels, the Western Cape is paying in 13.9%, and it's getting 10.1% back in return. So the notion that somehow the Western Cape would be worse off just doesn't bear scrutiny, unless they've done some secret feasibility study that has some wondrous numbers that I know nothing about, and that's we've left the door open to them to come back and say, well, listen, actually we've got this data that you haven't seen, but on the basis of all the published data from the government and in the national budgets, then the Western Cape would be substantially financially better off as an independent country and not worse off.
Well, I think it's a good summary there. It looks as though the Western Cape, essentially at the national level, is taken advantage of because it's contributing more tax revenue to the national treasury and getting less back from it.
Sure.
So let me just quickly say thank you very much to two new subscribers, Mary Lou Murray and Isabel Olivier. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. I hope you find this interesting. Thanks for tuning in. Whether you came here because you know Phil or you know about his cause, or you just found the channel because you walked across it serendipitously, thank you for joining us. So we are talking about Cape secession and the impacts of that. Now, UCN asked a question, which I think is a good question here before we finish the John Steenhuisen rebuttal. And it's a question that I think is very important. And I'll give you the answer, and then let's see if this answer makes sense, Phil, and if you agree. So UCN asked, why not devolve power? Well, my response to that as an outsider from South Africa would be that you do not have a federal system like we have in the United States, which a lot of people are actually advocating for in South Africa. But the reality is that you're not going to change the Constitution with the ANC in power because it's not to their advantage to give more power to provinces and metros. What do you say to that? Am I on the track, or is that something you disagree with, or does that make sense?
No, you nailed it. To change the constitution. So the irony is, it's far harder to get to federal autonomy than it is to get independence. To get federal autonomy, we need to get a 2/3 vote of all of South Africa, whereas to secede, we need to get 50% plus one person of just the Western Cape. So obviously the bar is infinitely higher, and given that the ANC is by nature centrist and wants to consolidate power of the state and party into Lutuli House, then it's going to be almost impossible to get federal autonomy and much easier to get independence.
So that seems to be one of the reasons where the motivations for this is that it seems, if I'm reading the tea leaves wrong here, Phil, please correct me, but it seems as though there is a realization on the part of people involved in your advocacy movement and others in the Cape that a federal system is simply unrealistic given the current realities, and that getting 50 plus one is going to be enough, and that you can actually pursue this. This is an achievable goal, secession.
Correct. Yeah, it is. Look, it's going to be a challenge, but it's fundamentally achievable. And there's one other slight point, which wasn't really something that was our primary thought process, but it's worthy of mention, which is the whole situation in Catalonia kicked off because Catalonia was given federal autonomy, and then Spain took it back. And given the conduct of the ANC government in South Africa and how it's morphing from what was a fairly well-intentioned organisation into what's becoming quite a radical organisation, there absolutely are no guarantees that even were we to get federal autonomy, that at some point in the future they wouldn't just decide to take it back, which clearly would not be a great situation. Hi, Chris, are you there?
Sorry, Phil. Yeah, my microphone was not hot. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah. So like I said, of course, there is one. If I'm not mistaken, there is one thing that's specifically different here. Is that if I'm not mistaken, the Spanish Constitution expressly forbids secession from the country. If I'm not mistaken, and there's no provision for that, barring that in South Africa's Constitution. At least I haven't found one.
Sure. No. Look. So look. The Catalan situation is different in lots of different ways and misunderstood by a lot of people. But that's correct. And the South African Constitution has a clause allowing self-determination. It's a funnily written clause that kind of offers all things to all men without actually being very definitive. It's section 235. So let's just say rather than that 235 would allow Cape secession, because I doubt it would. What it at least does is it tips the nod to say, well, when the South African Constitution was drafted, there clearly was an intent in the drafting of it that people should be able to obtain self-determination, and I think 235 is an indication of intent rather than the vehicle by which we'd want to get to secession.
Well, if in fact secession were to happen in the Western Cape, the DA would find itself in a very odd position. It's the one province where they rule, and it will now be an independent country. So I imagine this is a sticky wicket for the DA.
Yeah, look, it is, and look, they're slightly damned if they do and damned if they don't, which is why they've got this policy. No doubt why they've got this policy of silence, and why it's so important for us as an organisation and the broader movement to draw them out to the fence so that they kind of pick a side. And I think, ironically, the DA ultimately would do very well out of secession. I think there's virtually no doubt that were South Africa, were the Western Cape to secede, that the people would elect the DA government, and having spent the last three terms managing with one hand tied behind their back, they suddenly would be free to elect to carry out their own policies. And if you look even in the Western Cape Constitution, the Western Cape Manifesto of the DA for the last election, they've gone down this route. And I don't know if you saw the other article that I wrote, which was the DA's silent march to self-determination. But in that we discussed the DA's, forget what they're saying, their kind of de facto conduct. So in that manifesto, there's some quite startling claims they've made in there. So first of all, the DA has said, if the national government implements NHI, National Health Insurance, the DA will refuse to implement it in the Western Cape. And then they say that they will fight to take power for policing away from the national government and to the provincial government. And they say the same thing with the railway network. We basically will do all we can to take control of the railway network in the Western Cape. So the DA's kind of marched down that route, but they've kind of pulled their punches a bit. And I think they, from our point of view, we realise that there's going to be great tactical and strategic advantage in drawing this fight, because if that's, so does everybody else, and that's already.
Now we're losing your audio. We lost his audio completely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hang up with Phil here just a second. Sorry about that. We've lost him again. I'll call him back in just a moment. So for those tuning in now, just a minute, let me leave a note to him. Tell him to hold on. I'll tell him I'll call him back in a second. All right, so I've just sent him a text to let him know. Okay, so folks, so just for those tuning in late, thank you for joining us. You're listening to Indaba Africa. This is Chris on the Chris White Africa channel here on YouTube. My guest today for this special feature is Phil Craig, who is with the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, a group that's dedicated to secession for the Western Cape from South Africa. We're talking about the realities, the potentialities of this, and he's having some difficulty on his side with the network. So we had to go to voice only, and now I've lost even the voice. So I'm going to call him back in just a moment, and then I've got some more questions for him and that you guys have asked. So let me go ahead and try to call him back right now. Hang in there, folks. We'll see if we can get him back. Right. All right. So, yeah, very sorry for that, but this is the reality of the network at times, folks. It doesn't always work. Yeah, it's the C cables, Lone Wolf. That's exactly the problem. The West African cable connection is not playing nice again. So I'm calling him back, and I'm not getting a response. I don't know if Johan. Hey, Johan, good to see you there. Johan and Giselle. Ladies and gentlemen, Giselle, our favorite Afrikaans singing musician, is in the house along with Johan Eisel. That's right. All right. He's not coming through. All right. He looks like he's lost his network. What I will do is call when you are back online. I sound like a robot. All right. So I've left him a note. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that. We've lost Phil. Oh, there he is. He's calling now. Phil, are you there?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I'm there. I'm not. Apologies for whatever the problem is this end.
No, it's quite all right. It's understandable. I've spent a lot of my life in Africa, and the fact that you can actually make a call is usually just a bright sign in itself.
Yeah.
Now, we don't usually associate that with South Africa, but I guess these days you never know, with rolling blackouts, load shedding, incompetence, serial incompetence, patronage. Anyway, so without beating up on them, so let me ask this 800-pound gorilla question here, Phil. Now, not to be blunt, but I mean, as a person, as you and I have talked, I was skeptical of the secession movement that's taking place in the Cape. My question was, for instance, a lot of people not from South Africa look at the Western Cape and go, "Oh, that's where all the white people live." Well, first, that's not true. That's also a silly statement. But I mean, a lot of people actually say that, and even South Africans think that a big percentage of the population, because the DA wins, and of course, the DA is unfairly tagged as the party of whites by a lot of people. What happens is that people think there's a lot of white folks. But if you look at the Western Cape, I think about 17% of the population is actually European or white. Is that correct?
Yeah, less than that. 15.6% of the 15.7% of the population in 2011. It's probably shrunk a little bit since then. So, but at this point, the next census is due in 2021. So at this point, 15.7% of the population is white. So you're quite right. It's the smallest of all the ethnic groups. The mix of the Western Cape population. It's 49% Cape coloured. 33% Black African, and let's call it 15.7, so 16% white.
I think you meant to say 33% Black African. It sounded like you said 53.
No, 33. You're correct. Yeah,
33. Okay, just because I was like, is that new math? Is that like a 30 on the matrix? Is that, I know the ANC sets the academic standards quite low, but okay. So now the blunt. Yeah, Phil got a kick out of that one. But now for the this is why I hate when the video isn't working, because I couldn't see you laugh. I'm sure it was very entertaining. But okay, so here's the blunt question for you, Phil. Okay, so few white people live there. And a lot of people, I think, wrongly associate this concept of secession with just white folks. Obviously, that's not the case in the Western Cape, because if it was only whites voting for the DA, then there's no way they could possibly rule. Obviously, they're picking up votes from a lot of people in the Western Cape. But what happens to minorities, specifically coloreds, whites, and Indians in the rest of South Africa if you guys break away? I mean, let me finish this. But given the racialization that Cyril Ramaphosa has taken of late, this blatant, shameful, discriminatory, and racial language that he's taking, saying nonsensical things like the natural tendency of whites is to be racist, and that's why there's spousal abuse. Really? So someone in a township is beaten by their husband because white people are naturally racist? And all this other nonsense. The man is profited to the tune of almost $500 million from South Africa's economy, while most black South Africans languish in poverty while his government looks the other way, yet he calls the economy colonial racist. Anyway, the nonsense. So what I'm asking is there not a concern, is there not a fear for other South Africans who will be left behind and they will be targets potentially? I mean, I can easily see how people will be targeted by those who support the ANC and the rest of South Africa. Is there a thought about this? Have you guys thought of empathy for the rest of South Africans? And if so, do you have something in mind? I think I read something about that the Cape would welcome those who would like to come there if it became an independent state.
Sure. So look, we do. So one of the things that, so let me just, I want to answer that in two parts, because there's one part in terms of what we think, and then the other is in terms of what our mandate as an organisation is. So first of all, we are a single issue organisation that's lobbying for one thing. So we're very, very clear that that it's not our job to decide for the Western Cape what, as our a group of 15 strong people, sitting in meetings and deciding for 6 million Cape citizens what they want. So ultimately, if we have a referendum, then shortly afterwards there'll be new elections, and your various political parties will stand, and they will stand on tickets and advocating for the policies that they want, and then the people will choose between them. It won't be policies that we make. So we're very, very careful not to make policies up for on behalf of other people. All we want to do is give political power to the people of the Cape, and then they must decide for themselves. So that's the kind of proviso here. And we don't have a set policy on that. We only have the policy. We kind of touch on it. We have two policies because we believe that for those two policies, it's essential that we have them for people to decide whether they think Cape Independence is a good idea or not. And one is who will be citizens of the Cape, and the other one is what are the borders of the Cape. And that's the only two things we've got declared positions on. But this is an issue that we've touched on privately, so we've got suggestions, and clearly, and the thought process, and let me then be easy. Let me say what I think. So I think the best way for us to handle this is, and the way that we've discussed doing is potentially suggesting that the Western Cape offers refugee status to anybody in South Africa who is the victim of formal government-based racial discrimination. So for as long as the South African government is discriminating against white and coloured and Indian people, then white and coloured and Indian people should be able to get refugee status in the Western Cape. And when the government stops discriminating against them, then arguably that policy then would stop. And I think that's probably a sensible suggestion, but it's only a suggestion. We can't decide on the people of the Western Cape. The government must decide for itself.
All right, I think it's a very good point there. Hey, so let me just very quickly do a bit of housekeeping. Lawrence Vortz, who said, I think Lawrence said he had a lot of questions earlier, someone else did, just gave a super sticker, and I know you can't see it, Phil, but it's a hippo spinning around in an office chair, putting his arms up in the air. It's actually quite entertaining. So thank you for the super sticker there, Lawrence. It's much appreciated. 70 Rand, very kind of you. That, of course, made the zombie famously climb the Olifant's Neck mountain there in the Mahalisburg, which is a lovely sight. So that's my backdrop. But thank you so much for that. So there was a question here from Pinar van Wyk, and Pinar says, how do Christians, Muslims, and ancestral worship govern together? And before you answer that, Phil, I would say that quite easily, actually. You have a number of countries in which you have a mix of folks. So, for instance, much to the consternation of the mainstream media and the lies they tell about Israel, Israel's Knesset actually has Arab Muslim members in it, and folks govern quite effectively together. But that story is distorted. And here in the United States, we have millions of Muslims who live and worship in this country, and thousands of mosques around this country, as the same in West Germany. And the deal is that people have to agree to common core values and traits for society, which is what we have here. And so anyway, so that's I think that's important. But Phil, how can, from your perspective, I think the question is they're pointing out, of course, that many coloreds are Muslims and many whites are Christians, along with blacks. And then ancestral worship, I presume they're talking about the sun or something like that. But my point is, or I think the question was, how can these people work together, and can they?
Well, very easy to answer. They already do. Yeah, the DA has been in power for 3 terms. It came to power in 2009. So I'm looking here at the stats. So the DA, 77% of coloured people in the DA, 77% of coloured people in the Western Cape voted for the DA.
Wow.
20% of black people voted for the DA. 71% of white people voted for the DA, and of others, 83% voted for the DA. So you already have all 3 races and others voting in substantial numbers for the DA. And the DA has got white MPs, it's got coloured MPs, it's got black MPs, it's got Muslim MPs, it's got Christian MPs. So it's already there. We don't have to do anything different. All that we want right now in the Western Cape, the people elect the DA for their policies, but unfortunately the DA then has to carry out the ANC's policies, which are the very policies that the people of the DA, the people of the Western Cape, rejected at the election. So all that's going to happen is, in real terms, nothing is going to change, except instead of having the DA having to carry out ANC's policies, the DA can carry out the policies that they were elected to put in place in the first place. And that isn't going to change anything in terms of ethnicity or religion or so. I think a lot of these things are just red herrings because it's already there. We're changing very little. All we're doing is we're giving power to the government we've already elected, as opposed to having a government we elect which has no power.
And from an economic standpoint, we talked about taxation, but from an economic standpoint, most of the economic trade that, say, the Western Cape Province does is either with the rest of South Africa, Gauteng in particular, or the UK, China, or the US. So someone asked the question, what if the African Union took issue or they put sanctions on the Western Cape? I think the effect would be negligible, if anything.
Well, the two biggest, interestingly enough, look, you can look at many different ways. The Western Cape and South Africa are effectively two countries already. You can look at virtually any statistic if you like, and you'll find them sort of staggeringly different. Ethnicity. The rest of South Africa is 85% Black African. The Western Cape is 33% Black African. South Africa, 67% of people in South Africa vote for socialism, and it's something like 65% in the Western Cape vote for capitalism. 70% of people in the Western Cape either speak English or Afrikaans as a first language. 17% speak English or Afrikaans as a first language in South Africa. So we've got this stark contrast already. I understand, although I haven't checked the figures, so I speak under correction, that China is South Africa's biggest trading partner. The biggest trading partners of the Western Cape are the UK and the Netherlands. And perhaps unsurprisingly, because both of those countries have obviously got strong colonial ties with the Western Cape. So yeah, there's where we are with those.
So you and I talked as we built up to this week, Phil, and I asked the question about why not be semi-autonomous? So, for instance, in Italy, South Tyrol, which was part of Austria-Österreich for a millennia, was given as a reward a sot to the Italians for betraying the Central Alliance and joining the Allies in the First World War. So they gave them South Tyrol, which was overwhelmingly ethnically German or Austrian, German-speaking Austrian. So about almost 70% of the population. But over the course of time from the end of World War I until World War II, more and more Italians moved in. So now the mix is closer to, it's down to about 65, 66%. But that is an incredibly prosperous region of Italy. It has traditionally had very low unemployment. When Italy had 10, 15%, it habitually had 3 to 4% unemployment. Industry works very well there. Agriculture works well. The tourism industry, the Italians speaking and the German speaking Italians in that province get along. They've been given a lot of autonomy, and so they do a lot of essentially not really home rule, but self-autonomy. So what about semi-autonomous state for the Western Cape? Is that feasible or practical, or do you think it would work?
Well, so look, I know very little about South Tyrol. Actually, you're the second person who's asked me about it in a week or so I clearly must go and read up on it. But I think we come back to the earlier point that we made. The ANC isn't about to give increased autonomy to the Western Cape. They're fighting it tooth and nail. And there was an interesting court case. As a perfect example was during the electricity crisis. So just imagine the insanity of this. South Africa has run out of electricity, and we're having 4 hours a day with no electricity of rolling power cuts because there's not enough electricity. So the Western Cape, or the city of Cape Town in the Western Cape, decides that they want to go and buy electricity from somewhere else. And the government won't allow them to buy electricity, even though we haven't got any electricity. Then they take them to court. So currently the court case is the judgment is reserved. It's taken place. So the city of Cape Town took the ANC government to court for the right to buy electricity when there isn't any. And the ANC basically they made a deal, or tried to make a deal with the city of Cape Town, and they said, you can buy electricity as a one-off. We'll allow you to buy electricity if you drop the court case, because court cases create precedents, and we will not allow you to have the precedents of having control over anything. And further than that, Gwyd Matashi specifically said, we are not going to relinquish power from the national government to provinces. So I think that's your answer. That's the position of the ANC. Gwyd Matashi would be considered a moderate in the ANC. So the moderates in the ANC say we're not going to relinquish power to the provinces. And you can imagine then what the extremists that are waiting in the wings think.
Well, So now you've treaded into my zone there, Phil. I am a very much a staunch opponent of state-owned enterprises. And, of course, that is the reason why they won't allow you to purchase power, because the state-owned enterprise, Eskom, the poorly managed patronage machine, state capture, pilfering, and debt-burdened Eskom is the reason why they won't let you do that. So I detest state-owned enterprises, whether it's here in the United States or it's abroad. And I see that as something that truly holds people back. So now we're entering my domain. But Let me do a bit of housekeeping here very quickly, Phil. So we're coming up an hour, but we did lose, and we're actually also peaking at the number of people tuning in. We're just shy of 100 folks tuning into the stream right now. So thank you so much. You're listening to Indaba Africa on the Chris Wyatt Africa channel. I'm Chris Wyatt in Central Pennsylvania. My special guest today on a Sunday special feature live stream is Phil Craig, who's involved with the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, calling for secession of the Cape from the Republic of South Africa. And so we're talking about this topic, and we've covered a bit, but we had some technical difficulties on his end with the internet, so we got off to a shaky start there. So Phil, can you stay a little bit longer, or do you have to drop off now?
No, we can go as long as we like. Yeah.
Okay, well, don't say that, Phil. I've had 4-hour and 20-minute live streams. We're not doing that today. All right.
No,
so
maybe not quite that long.
Okay, so a little bit more housekeeping, ladies and gentlemen. So it's interesting, now that I've just started doing the live. Lawrence Vutz, you've never been subscribed. Lawrence Vutz just subscribed. Well, thank you so much for that, Lawrence. You've been tuning into the live streams and you weren't subscribed. So thank you for subscribing. Also, Vanessa Mostart, she subscribed a bit ago. So thank you, Vanessa, for joining. It's like 3 women in a row subscribed. Thank you so much. I appreciate getting a little bit more of diversity of viewpoint coming in there. Women oftentimes have different viewpoint than we men do. But thank you so much for that. And whenever I see the name Mostart, of course, I think of Franco Mostart because I think of the Springboks being a rugby fan. But anyway, so let me get back to the super chat. Elizabeth gave a 50 Rand super chat, and she said, so many people are skeptical of secession. Well, Elizabeth, you are correct. I am one of them. Although, as I said, I have an open mind, and what Phil has said and what I've read from his advocacy group does have me intrigued. And certainly I'm, as a person, I'm skeptical, not simply because in a South African context, but of course from geopolitical standpoint, I'm familiar with this from around the world and with other situations. So it is an interesting discussion. I'm really glad we have Phil on today. But she says so many people are skeptical of secession. The promoting of secession needs to be done bigger, which means larger. What is the strategy going forward? Yeah, so that's a good question, Phil. Can you tell us what the strategy is for the Cape? Because, by the way, it's not a political party. That we should make that clear. Your group is not a political party, and you're not trying to become a political party. You are simply advocating for a change of political status and sovereignty, essentially. You're looking for sovereignty for the Western Cape, yes?
Correct. Yeah, we're a political lobby group. There is a political party called the Cape Party who advocate for secession, and we support their activities, but they're nothing to do with us.
So someone asked this question earlier, and I'm not familiar with them. The ULA. Are you familiar with the ULA, and what is that?
So that's the United Liberty Alliance. That's so effectively, in terms of groups, there's probably 5, maybe 6 groups that push for independence. There is the Cape Party, who are a political party. And then there are, and they are civic nationalists. There's us, who are a political lobby group. We would also be civic nationalists. Then you've got a couple of cultural nationalists, which would be the Cape Exit and the ULA, and they are both pushing for peaceful and inclusive secession. But more around the Afrikaans language and the Cape culture, as opposed to us in terms of just purely on terms of democratic will. So therefore, then you've got an organisation called the Sovereign State of Good Hope, which is a Khoisan organisation, and they are pushing for independence. In fact, they've declared the Cape independent already. Look, nobody's taken. Obviously, it hasn't happened, but they've declared it independent 2 years ago, and they are claiming it on First Nation status and Aboriginal rights. And then the sort of the one that's a bit of an unknown quantity, but there was an organisation called Hupful Capetonians, who were coloured nationalists, and they were advocating for some quite extreme policies at the expense of black South Africans, and we certainly wouldn't support that. They've now morphed into a political party called the Cape Coloured Congress, and their policy is a bit undefined on self-determination and independence. But they do seem to have moderated a bit. Where they'll end up, I don't know. We're trying to find out where they are, because we will work with organisations that are non-racial. But we won't work with organisations that are racist.
Well, there's we had another person subscribe. I just do a little housekeeping here. So is it Redditch? I'm not sure, but Redditch KKE. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Really appreciate it. Now, I'm going to raise a topic here that actually today sort of took a setback, if in fact it's true. We discovered today that according to a report in the Citizen, that the EFF and the ANC are reportedly colluding to postpone the 2021 municipal elections. So my point when this topic has come up of late has been that folks need to focus on the 2021 municipal elections and knock the knock the ANC out of power in all the major metros with a party getting a majority. So I guess the question, and Harry Mako raises this point. He says everyone hates the ANC. Why not just not break away and just try to defeat the ANC? I think you have an answer for that, but why not wait till the 2021 elections to give this a chance? Do you think it's too late, or is everything lost?
Well, so I think the Cape Independence is a battle that's fought on many fronts. So we are fighting it on the political front as a political lobby group, but not as a political party. The Cape Party are fighting it as a political party. So clearly for them, 2021 is a major point of focus. Whereas for us, we don't need to, and we work. Actually we're in regular contact with the Cape Party, because I suspect in 2021, if we've not got this done, we will mobilise our resources to help them. And meanwhile, they often contact us, and we have conversations, because there are things that we can do between elections that they can't. So there's a degree of cooperation between the groups. In terms of the question about the ANC, the honest answer is the rest of South Africa does want the ANC. It does leave you to wonder why on earth you would want a deeply corrupt and incompetent government. But the bottom line is, don't make any mistakes. South African elections are broadly free and fair, and the people of South Africa want the ANC and elect the ANC. And whilst I cannot fathom for 1 second why people who are suffering at the hands of them do that, they do that, and they have the right to do that. So there's no question that they are the legitimate government of South Africa.
Well, I think it's a good response, Phil. Thank you for that. So I'm either going to make my audience laugh in tears and wet themselves, or it'll be much appreciated, because Kyle is saying something to someone named Manti Hallo. It says, "Da subscribe als Sie all nie hätten. Chris is wonderlijke praat bij South Africa. Anyway, so I say that so that they get a kick out of my poor pronunciation, but I got the message that Kyle is sharing. And this is completely unrelated, Phil. I'm way out in left field here, but Pinar van Wyk says, can we make a 12-team Curry Cup again, please? My answer to that, Pinar, and if Phil wants to weigh in, he's welcome to afterwards, but my answer to that is that you can't even fill the stadiums now with only half a dozen teams in Curry Cup. It's really pathetic, ladies and gentlemen. It's very embarrassing for me to promote South African rugby, and people turn on the television to watch 1,200 people show up at a Griquas game, or to show up in Bloemfontein watching the Cheetahs play. It's really, really sad. Even Loftus these days, there's only a few thousand people showing up. Knock it off. I know we can't have this now because of this COVID-19 hysteria, lockdown nonsense. But if life ever gets back to normal in South Africa and or the independent Cape of Good Hope, whatever happens there, you need to get back to rugby. You need to patronize these things, get out there and show up, because it's embarrassing for the world's greatest rugby nation. And no, it's not New Zealand. I'm sorry, Kiwis. It's South Africa. The world's greatest rugby nation has empty stadiums. So anyway, Phil, you have any comments about rugby and the Curry Cup?
So, not particularly about the 12 teams. I can say that Cape Town has the largest attendances of anybody in Super Rugby. So we're doing our bit in the Western Cape. But yes, it would be nice to see the stadiums fuller.
Pinar's response to me was, "Ouch." Well, there you go. All right, so I'm sorry, we got very far away from your response back to John Steenhuisen, who recently commented on this. And we just addressed the issue about whether it's legal and the question about whether it's financially feasible. And I think we both agree that that's the case. I'm in agreement with you there. But the two other points to John Steenhuisen was about whether there's hope with secession and his own personal position about somebody being the outside. Can you explain those a little bit better?
Sure. So in terms of hope, then John kind of obviously is the DA leader, so he is going to trot out the DA party line. We are in touch with members of the DA, so in the Western Cape, and we understand that actually there are, as you would imagine, there's very fundamentally different views. People within the Western Cape DA who are elected, and people outside of the Western Cape DA who haven't been elected as the government, and they've got slightly different views. But as the leader, John suggests that the future for South Africa is that the Western Cape carries on doing a fantastic job with one hand tied behind its back. He didn't say that part. I'm adding that for emphasis. But they have done a fantastic job in the Western Cape. Materially, the Western Cape is performing way better than any other province in virtually every possible measure. So kudos to the DA. They've done a fantastic job, and the people of the Western Cape, most of us, me certainly, are eternally grateful for the DA. John thinks that we can just kind of carry on doing that, and eventually the rest of South Africa will see what we're doing and fall in line. But I mean, it's a crazy notion that that's going to happen, because it just isn't. And we gave him some statistics, and one of the scary statistics, obviously, people look at the voting statistics for South Africa. And one of the things that I've done, and I suggest they should do the same thing, is to remove the Western Cape, so you kind of see what the rest of South Africa thinks. And the reality is, I took the ANC and the EFF, and I added together their combined vote. So I'm calling that socialist and racial nationalist. That's the vote for there. And in 1994, 66% of South Africa voted for the ANC. The number of people voting for the ANC and the EFF combined is not decreasing, as the DA would like us to believe. It's increasing. And in 2019, the highest proportion ever voted for the DA and the EFF, and it was 73.1% of South Africans voted for either the ANC or the EFF outside of the Western Cape. So the notion that somehow those people are going to have some kind of Damascus conversion, having ignored Jacob Zuma stealing the country blind, having ignored nobody going to court, having ignored the arms deal thefts, having ignored Nkandla, having ignored Ismagashuli and the Frida scandal, and numerous other ones, and suddenly they're going to come to their senses, is just laughably naive. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And our notion is, look, you know what, ironically, and in any case, John's confusing what's best for the people of South Africa and what's best for the people of the Western Cape. The Western Cape is only deciding for itself. So the people of the Western Cape have a right for themselves. They don't have to consider the rest of South Africa into the equation. Ultimately, we're a people that is 6 million strong, which is far bigger than a lot of countries in themselves. And the Western Cape economy is bigger than the same size as Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe combined. So we're already a country of our own, and we don't want to be governed by the ANC, and we don't have to kind of put our wishes on ice in the hope that John can somehow rescue the rest of South Africa. If he wants to rescue the rest of South Africa, I really hope he's successful. I desperately hope that. But we can't sacrifice ourselves, because he's got some wild vision that perhaps by some miracle that all of a sudden the rest of South Africa the scales are going to fall from their eyes. They're suddenly going to vote DA, and the DA itself has reminded him. One had this miraculous result in 2016 where they won 3 metros, which they then got to govern in coalition, which was Nelson Mandela Bay, Johannesburg, and Pretoria. And what happened is Nelson Mandela Bay, the coalition collapsed. Their partners sold them out, and the DA mayor resigned from the DA, Apple Trollop. In Johannesburg, the partners sold them out. The DA mayor, Herman Mashaba, resigned from the DA. And in Pretoria, it's currently in court case. One DA mayor has resigned. The second one is hanging on by the skin of his teeth whilst the High Court decides whether it can go on. And we asked John, is that really a better future for the people of the Western Cape than just electing the DA government, who've got a straight majority, and giving them power? Because we kind of then said, look, you know what? At some point, the people of the Western Cape are going to have enough of the DA and say, look, you know what? Either you represent us, or we find somebody else that will represent us. And I think that moment isn't coming now, but it's coming.
It's well stated, Phil. But here's a serious question. Given that the Parliament's located in Cape Town, do you have plans to charge taxes for the South African Parliament remaining in Cape Town once you're an independent country?
No, it'll have to move. And bear in mind that the Parliament building is the old Parliament building from the Cape Colony. So that Parliament building belonged to us. So we've allowed the South Africa to use it for since we've been in the Union of South Africa. And when we split back up, then obviously it'll be our Parliament building, and they could go and use one of the other ones that they've got elsewhere. There are other Parliament buildings in South Africa, because obviously there originally was 4 countries that that came together, or 4 territories that came together to make South Africa.
So, of course, if in fact this were to go forward and secession were to happen, and whether it's recognized by others or not, you can't simply say we're an independent country. You've got to have a basis. You're going to want to have a constitution, maybe a declaration of independence, or some baseline, a Bill of Rights, things like that. And then, of course, think about things like flags and symbols, crest, and national language. So are people working on issues like this? And so, for instance, for the Western Cape, would you have a single national language, or would it be Afrikaans, English, and Xhosa, or anybody thinking about those issues?
So yes, people are thinking about them. Obviously, the Cape Party, as a political party, has got formal positions on those. Us as a lobby group, we don't. But I think it's fairly understood. None of the parties are wanting to change the status quo. So I think it's fairly clear that that all 3 languages will continue: English and Afrikaans and Xhosa. And I think actually one thing that probably all of those ethnic groups will agree is that all of them want to preserve and respect their own culture. Obviously English is the de facto language and will continue to be the common language of South Africa. It's the one that everybody speaks as a second language if it's not their first language. But it's really important that we preserve Afrikaans culture and the Afrikaans language, and it's really important that the Xhosa language is preserved too, and perhaps where the Xhosa people don't have their fair share of facilities. So there's this big argument around, for example, Stellenbosch University, which is a traditional Afrikaans university and has now become English. Personally, and this isn't our policy, this is me speaking, I would love to see Stellenbosch University return to its Afrikaans roots and continue in the tradition. I would love to see UCT at Cape Town go back to being a proper, decent English-speaking university and not a hotbed of left-wing activity. And I would love to see a Xhosa university built and developed so that Xhosa people have a university they can be proud of and where they can have mother tongue education too.
No, I think it's a great point. So a little bit of housekeeping here. Elizabeth, I have not forgotten your super chat. Thank you from Elizabeth. Gave a 50 Rand super chat a little bit ago, but we've had interesting discussions, so I'm just now getting to it. So thank you so much for that, Elizabeth, for supporting the channel. And she asked a question of you, Phil. Do we need to wait for elections, or can we push this through quicker while ANC incompetence is still fresh in everyone's mind?
No, we absolutely can push it through. Obviously, it's a process, and it depends on the people of the Western Cape. Ultimately, we're not there yet. And I think if we had a referendum, it would be marginal, and maybe we'd even lose the referendum if we held it now, because I think there's a lot of skeptical people out there, and the debate just hasn't been had. So the starting point here is this is a conversation that needs to become dinner table conversation around a braai, conversation at the pub, so that and political conversation. The political parties have the courage to talk about it, whether they're for it or against it. So that's the first stop. Is that we kind of need to in any of these ideas, that the first people that come to them are the extremists, and there are extremists on both sides. So we need to capture the centre, get rid of the extremists on both sides of the argument, and to marginalise them so that the centre, the moderate middle has the conversation, and we decide what's best for the people of the Western Cape as a whole, and that's the sort of starting point. And in terms of, and it kind of ties in with Elizabeth's question in terms of what is the strategy. So we've got 4 things. Our strategy as an organisation has 4 strings. And interestingly enough, I was asked this question on a different interview yesterday. Somebody said, well, what can we do? And the answer is you can do exactly the same 4 things that we're doing. So I'm going to tell you what they are, and individual people can do the same as we do. So the first thing that we're looking to do is to increase the visibility of the independence movement by promoting the symbols of independence. So currently, we're voting on it this week. The various independence groups have got together, and we're trying to get one symbol, so that albeit that every organisation will have its own symbol, but we're going to have one overriding symbol that is let's call it the flag. It doesn't necessarily need to be a flag, but let's call it the flag of the Western Cape, so that people can, whether they are Cape Party supporters, whether they support the ULA, whether they support Cape Exit, whether they kind of feel aligned to us, that all of those people can go and fly the same flag, so that the kind of people can see that this thing is gaining ground and popularity. So for us, it's about visibility. And I think in terms of individuals, obviously you can take part in those campaigns. The first one is going to be a car mirror sock campaign where we'll make up the little flags that go on the car mirrors, and people will be able to buy those and put them on their car and drive around the Cape and see other people doing the same thing. And then people that haven't been engaged will start to think, well, why do I keep seeing this flag everywhere? And so on. So that's the first thing. So for us, it's visibility. And then I think for individuals, you can then have the conversations with your friends, with your partners at work, and ask people what they think. We don't have to have everybody to agree with us, but let's just talk about it. If people disagree with us, as long as they disagree intelligently, then great, let's have that conversation. So that's visibility. That's number one. Number two is we have a PR campaign. So in other words, we specifically want to make the media start talking about independence. Again, for or against, but at least have the topic. And we've already started with that. So in this month now, I think we've had 5 or 6 articles published. 2 articles, but published in 5 or 6 major publications: the Mail and Guardian, the Rational Standard, the Daily Friend from the Institute of Race Relations, Marula Media. So that people can start reading about independence and find it's happening. And again, as individuals, you can write to the letter section of the Cape Times. You can write to News 24. News 24 is quite a left-wing organisation, we've challenged them. I called out the editor Adrian Basson on Twitter yesterday because I went and did a search on News 24, which is the premier news site in South Africa. And I Googled, or they've got an internal, it wasn't Google, it's an internal search. And I put in Cape Independence to see when they spoke about Cape Independence. And it returned 2 results. The biggest newspaper, digital newspaper in South Africa, returned 2 results. A letter that somebody wrote in 2012, and a political article by a commentator called R.W. Johnson, who's very famous, and that was in 2016. Now, all those articles that we've had published by other publications, we submitted to News 24. They've just ignored them because they don't want to talk about Cape Independence. So as individual people, you can start to tag these people. You can send them letters. You can send them notes and try and get people to start talking about independence. So that's number 2. Number 3 is probably more likewise you can. So for us, it's our political strategy, which is to engage the DA and to get them talking about independence. You guys can do the same thing. You can go to your local councillor, your DA councillor, and ask him, listen, what's your view on independence? Please raise it to the branch meetings. Let's get the DA talking about independence. If you're on Twitter or if you're on Facebook, tag the DA, tag the people that are DMM, and ask them for their views. Draw them into the debate. And then the 4th thing we do is we support the other groups that are pushing for independence. So we support the Cape Party, and we support the Cape Exit, and we support the ULA. Likewise, you can do the same thing. At the election, you can vote for the Cape Party. And then both Cape Exit and the ULA have mandates where they ask people to fill up on their websites. Go and do them all. Vote for the Cape Party, fill out a mandate for Cape Exit, and fill out a mandate for the ULA. And if you do all of those things and people start doing that, then we'll see massive numbers. But I mean, what's very interesting is this is an idea that's really coming of its time. We got to 4,000 followers, more than that now, 4,500, I think, in 4 weeks. Cape Exit told us yesterday that their followers increased from 18,000 to 40,000 in the last 3 weeks. Cape Party are reporting that they're having massive upticks in terms of support. So clearly people are now coming on board, and it's starting to become, and hopefully our efforts will have contributed to that, as will everybody else's.
All right, so Phil, UCN, who I believe is based in Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken, had a couple points here. I'll get to those in just a second. My moderators, I think, were being overzealous, and his comments were deleted, so I've got them here. I'm going to get to them. But Harry Mako made a couple points earlier, and I'll address them very quickly, and then Phil, you can jump in if you like. He was making the point that federalism is interesting, but it doesn't work anywhere except the U.S. Well, actually, that's not accurate. Switzerland has a federal system. It's incredibly successful, and it predates our system. Australia also has a very successful federal system, and there are other examples of it. And then Harry's just asked the second question about, well, what's the Western Cape going to do? What's their economy? Do they have any minerals? Well, extraction is not the future for folks. Minerals certainly help an economy, but that's part of Africa's problem, is that too much of the continent is based on extractive industries. And so actually the Western Cape has a very vibrant economy. You have a wine industry, you have tourism, you have shipping, you have finance, you have other issues or other parts. Agriculture is a huge part of the Cape wine, or not the Western Cape, but there are minerals as well. The Western Cape has, or Western and Northern Cape, I'm trying to remember, has a rare earth mine which has been put in development, some other things. So, any comments on the federal examples there, Phil, or the mineral comments about the economy, and then I'll get to UCN's questions.
Look, I think you answered those questions better than I could have. You know the other examples of federalism better than me, so fantastic. And your description of the South African economy or the Western Cape economy is perfect. That's exactly the mainstay of the economy, and the Western Cape economy is performing better than the rest of South Africa. It's already the size of in terms of growth rates. It's already the size of Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe combined, and that's under the ANC's disastrous economic policies. So once it's liberated from those, that the economy is going to boom.
And I think the example of Switzerland's actually apropos, because Switzerland's about 8 or 9 million people. The Western Cape is 6 million people now. Before people decide to go there, in fact, if it becomes independent, it's likely to see its population swell with people migrating in. But I think those two are an apt comparison. Although economically, it would be much smaller than Switzerland, which is a colossus economically. But it could grow over time. Now, UCN had a couple points which were removed from the chat, and I don't think he meant any disrespect with this, and he doesn't. But just to sort of blunt questions. He said, Phil, with due respect, you have to be realistic with your aspirations. That's the first point. And he says, the goal is laudable, but your strategy and modality is very suspect, to say the least. You do need to finesse your approach. Would you agree with that, or do you think that you're pretty clear and straightforward?
Look, to be honest, if we thought it was the wrong strategy, we wouldn't be doing it. So our political strategy is very, very clear, and it's been incredibly successful so far in our short period of time. Whether it turns out to be the right one, I don't know. But I would say, if we're in a situation where we set our goals to try and to increase the incidence rates and to support people, and actually we're at the point where we're about to agree a common symbol with the other groups. We've got media articles published for the first time into the press. We've picked up a large number of supporters. We've drawn the DA into commenting on secession. I would say we've had a fairly spectacular first 4 or 5 weeks, and some of the things I can't give you the details on, because obviously they're sensitive. But what I can tell you is, whilst we've been busy, we haven't had time really to go out and engage people. But we have probably had 5 or 6 really, really high-profile people arrive at our door. And when I talk about high-profile people, I'm talking about national politicians, leadership roles, key members of civil society who we haven't gone and looked for. An organisation that's 4 weeks old is having people arrive at its door saying, "Listen, actually, this is the approach we've been waiting for. We want to be involved in this." And some of those developments will come online over time, but they are incredibly exciting and would suggest that we've nailed the strategy as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Phil, we're coming up on an hour and 26 minutes, which is a fascinating stream, and we just seem to just keep growing in audience. So that's interesting. But what have we missed here? Have we not covered, or any questions that I haven't asked that you think are particularly relevant when it comes to the issue of Cape secession?
Well, I think we've covered an awful lot of stuff. As a rule, our strategy is so simple that there's not that much for me to say. Now, we're a fairly open book, and in terms of what we want to do, I think if people have got questions, let them just bring their questions. I think I think we said when we chatted before, and I say it often on my own Twitter feed, a good idea must withstand scrutiny. So there's no part of me that wants to hide from this. And I think one of the fascinating things about the Western Cape independence debate is that it's not those that are advocating for independence that are scared of the debate or scared of having a referendum to see what people want. Actually, it's people that don't want independence who are scared of the debate, and it's people who don't want independence that don't want to have a referendum to find out what people really want. And that's quite telling. But perhaps there's one little question that I always find useful, and let's just reverse the question and say, look, you know what? If you're struggling to ask yourself, is Cape independence a good or a bad idea? Just reverse the question and do it the other way around. If the Western Cape now was an independent country, and you saw what was going on with South Africa and you saw how the ANC was conducting itself, would you be voting to give up political power and go and join South Africa and be governed instead by the ANC? And I think if we had a referendum in that scenario, would an independent Cape want to join South Africa? I think we all understand what the outcome of that referendum would be, and I think that should be quite a telling thought process for people.
I actually think if you flip the question around like that, I think that's a very good point to make. If you did ask people, they wouldn't want to sign up for it. It's also interesting, too. It beggars imagination that people still vote for the African National Congress. I noticed that someone a little while ago described the African National Congress as angry, naughty children. I think that's one of the most interesting uses of ANC I've seen recently. It's a shame, from my perspective, having observed from outside, having observed the liberation struggle or the effort to move to a democratic South Africa, and what happened during the People's War in KZN in South Africa. But from a time before that, from its origins back in 1912, and for a long period of time, the ANC actually stood for good ideals and good outcomes. And it was multiracial and it was market-based approach, although there was a lot of, socialist rhetoric in there starting in the 60s. But I really think that they've shamed themselves. They've tarnished their legacy and their effort to rewrite history, and now the racialization of South African civil society by the party as a whole, including the sitting president of South Africa, is really disturbing. And so I can understand why people would be frustrated. But it beggars my imagination that in 2019 that the ANC still got nearly 60% of the vote. That's just, it's unfathomable. Now, I realize that education plays a big role in this, but still, it's not surprising, but it's disappointing.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, it is. But I think ultimately, and I guess that's we started at the front, and I said I'm a pragmatist. So why it almost isn't relevant to me. It clearly is relevant, but that's been a bit churlish. But what's far more important is it is. That is the reality of the situation. We can't make plans on what we wished was the case. You'll know yourself as a military man. Actually, what's the situation on the ground, and how do we react to the situation on the ground? And that's where we are with South Africa. This is what it is, and we have to react to what's in front of us, not what we wished was in front of us.
Well, two things very quickly here. One is thank you to UCN, whose comments I brought in after they were deleted. I think someone misinterpreted them, but that's fine. No worries. No slam on my moderators. Thank you for the job you're doing, moderators. And to UCN, thank you for the comments, and I'm glad that I caught it so I could bring it in. But UCN just gave a super sticker, a big thank you. So for 50 Hong Kong dollars. So that's a real currency. So thank you so much for that. I'm actually surprised I can use the internet in Hong Kong these days, what with Beijing taking over. But anyway, but seriously, thank you for the super chat, UCN. It's my pleasure. And by the way, folks, ask your questions on here. As long as nobody's disrespectful or abusive, I welcome all discourse here. That's what the purpose of the channel is. And we don't have to agree on everything, and we take differing views in here. Otherwise, we never progress. We never get anywhere. We never get to a good solution, whatever the topic may be. So, for instance, those who know me know I'm a huge fan of Botswana, but I do not hesitate to criticize the Botswana Democratic Party when it comes to governance failures there. Nonetheless, I think they've done a pretty good job. Anyway, so the other thing is Tertia Basson is very skeptical here, Phil. She made a point saying people cannot just sell and go south where there are a few jobs. Only retirees do this, and they're not economically active anymore. And then she said, let me find the second comment she had. She said she's lived. Sorry, the chat's getting away from me here. She's lived all over. Oh, there it is. No, but she's lived all over the country. She's lived in the Eastern Cape. She lived in Gauteng. She lived in Northern Cape, Western Cape. Anyway, so I think that she's very skeptical about the secession movement, despite hearing the conversation.
Sure. Look, people are entitled to their views, and I don't mind anybody who disagrees with us. In the day, we're all individuals, and we all must say what we believe. The bottom line is, and it comes back to this: Cape independence is about what's best for the people of the Cape, and why clearly we've got sympathies for people that are outside of the Cape. The bottom line is this is about us. This is about the 6 million people who do live in the Western Cape, who are voting year in, year out for the DA, and keep getting the ANC. And there's a terrifying statistic actually, which probably highlights the problem more than anything else. And this is a statistical fact, and you can go and check it out yourself. If you go and get the numbers from the Electoral Commission, which are all online, it's easy to get, and if since 1994, if every single vote that was cast in the Western Cape was for the DA, then we would have got an ANC government in every single election. So what we vote for in the Western Cape is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. We can't ever get anything other than what the rest of South Africa votes for. So the ANC would potentially, under the current system, have governed the Western Cape as the national government of the Western Cape for 26 years with 0% of the vote. And actually, they're currently governing it with 28% of the vote. And they're using that 28% of the vote to have policies that discriminate against 65% of the population of the Western Cape, and that just is not a tenable situation. And that, of course, we're deeply sympathetic for people who are suffering those same discriminations on the South African side of the Western Cape border. But we can't fix your problems, unfortunately. We have to look after our own problems, and we have to act in the best interest of the people of the Western Cape.
Well, I think that's a great point there, Phil. And so let me say this succinctly and see if it makes sense. So the key issue here is when it comes to self-determination, one must identify a nation. And it sounds to me as though you folks in the Western Cape, at least those who are pushing for secession, have defined a nation comprised of Khoi, San, Afrikaner, English, Coloreds, and Xhosa at a minimum. You defined yourself as a nation, as a conglomerate. And so that's a firm basis to come up with your own territorial integrity. And then once you become a nation state, of course, now here's the political realist in me coming out from the School of International Political Theory, and that is that states do act in their self-interest. And so that's kind of, even though you don't have an independent state at this point, you are acting in your self-interest. Your focus, your concern is for the Western Cape, and then you will be open to others, but your view is that your primary responsibility is to the citizens of the Western Cape. Did I get that right?
Yeah, 100%. And we can't unfortunately, we can't fix South Africa. Even people who are against the ANC in South Africa can't fix, because we, as the numbers we said, 26.9%, only 26.9% of the rest of South Africa voted against the ANC and the EFF, and that's and I feel desperately sorry for that 26.9%. But we can't help you, but we can help ourselves.
Well, Tertia's not convinced. She says that the only realistic option for the country is the DA. So I'm a person that now we'll see what happens with if there's any merit, or not merit, but there's no merit to it. But there's any truth to the ANC trying to delay this election in 2021. But now I'm fully cognizant of what happened in 2016 and the fact that even though they had a plurality, the DA had to go into a coalition for Nelson Mandela Bay, and they didn't have a plurality in Johannesburg, but they managed to get a coalition. And they had a plurality in Pretoria and had a coalition. And all that's been shaky and been a disaster. But much like the situation with the Movement for Democratic Change in Zimbabwe, when they won the election outright and Mugabe refused to step down from office even though he lost the election, despite the cheating and ballot stuffing that the ZANU-PF party did. They lost that election. When they refused to step down and there was a government of national unity formed and the MDC joined that, all it did was tarnish the MDC. So I get the point, and that's kind of what's happened with the DA's municipal rule, with the exception of Cape Town, I think, in this cycle of municipal elections. But despite that, and even though I'm also a person that was very critical of the DA from 2017 to 2019 because they lost the plot in my view, I'm still of the position, I think, that in 2021 the municipal elections can be a sea change, assuming there are elections. If there aren't elections, in South Africa's going to be in a lot of trouble. But it doesn't sound like folks in the Western Cape are prepared to wait to 2021. And it looks like a lot of groups are looking towards moving towards succession. So let me ask this question. It seems like there's a lot of groups. As people mentioned, you mentioned 4 or 5 different groups. Someone mentioned in the chat. Is this movement fractured, or is it just because it's a nascent movement and people may be coming together at some point?
No, so look, I don't think it's if you've got 6 million people, they aren't all gonna believe the same thing. So I think and they've all got different strategies, and I think that's healthy. I think so. Let's look at it the other way. We've got a number of different groups that are covering a number of different bases, and collectively we're stronger because we're covering all the bases. So the Cape Party has a strategy. They want to bring the DA below 50% into the Western Cape, and they want to get enough votes to be the kingmaker. So they've got a political strategy. Now, if that comes off, then fantastic. Arguably, that would be a very strong strategy, perhaps the strongest strategy, but obviously it's high risk, and you wouldn't want to have all of your eggs in that strategy, because there's no guarantee the DA will fall below 50%, and there's no guarantee that the DA will appoint the Cape Party as the kingmaker either. So it's good that we've got that, but it can't be the only strategy. the Cape Exit and the ULA are both trying to get a whole number of mandates, and they want to go the legal route. And if they can get those mandates and they can go the legal route and they can get the UN involved, then fantastic. I think it's also a long shot, but I'm glad they're trying it. And actually, you know what? If they end up getting 700,000 people rather than the 1.6 million they're targeting, then that 700,000 is still a massive number of people and a huge base of activism to move forward. We are a political lobby group, and we are pushing to influence the policy of the DA and to try and kind of pull some of these threads together, and we're probably the with the Cape Party the most moderate of all of the groups, and that's serving a different purpose too. So I think it's great that we've got these different strings to our bow. We couldn't all come together because we don't all believe exactly the same thing, is the honest answer. But ultimately we all believe in independence, and if we can get to a referendum and we can win the referendum, then there'll be a number of political parties, and I suspect that we would support different parties in the post-referendum election. That's fine. That's what democracy is about.
So just me asked a question about a national security question here, and so I'll answer it, but it may sound a little sarcastic, but I'm being a little cheeky here. So he asked, how will the Western Cape protect and defend its land borders and its shoreline? And my answer to that is you can protect your land borders with sheep. Just graze sheep out there, and it'll stop any invasion. And you can protect your sea borders because the South African Navy will be incapable of sailing its Type 209 diesel-powered submarines out of Simonstown to relocate to Durban or Port Elizabeth, and their cruisers won't be able to relocate because they can't crew them. So I think they'll sell them at a fire sale price to the new Republic of the Western Cape or the Cape of Good Hope province, whatever it's called. And so you won't need to worry because you'll have ships and submarines available for your own new Navy, and you can use sheep to patrol your borders.
Well, there we go. You answered it for me.
So before we get much further, I just want to point out here, Herman Roos, who's a tobacco farmer, and he's been on my channel, and he was a fantastic guest. We talked about tobacco farming in South Africa, particularly in light of the tobacco ban. But Herman has started his own channel. It's called Farmers Travel. I get that backwards. But anyway, I was his first guest on there. He is going to attempt live streaming today. It'll be as soon as we finish. He's going to literally leave when this is over. So if anybody wants to go check it out. Now, listen, I think you should. Herman, put your link, because I know he's here. Put your link in the chat because you're a moderator so people can get to it. I saw you did it earlier. But please put your link in so people can open a tab up and go check your channel out. Now, what I ask you all to do, those who are here, just go to his channel, check it out, give him a hard time because he's experimenting. He's trying to see if he can figure out how to do the live stream. And for those of you who watch me doing tests on my live stream, I do them periodically when I change my studio or add different capability. It's actually entertaining if you're a viewer. You get to watch people stumble through it. So just go have a good time, have a crack, go check out his channel. But Herman, put your link in here once again for us folks. Herman Roos, he's the tobacco farmer. So sorry about that, Phil. I just want to mention that very quickly because it should be fun for people to go watch that.
Sterkte, Herman.
There you go. Excellent. So let's see, about an hour and 40 minutes. And again, we're peaking on viewers. So this is clearly a topic of great interest. So we've talked about the legal ramifications, the fact that it's practical. We didn't really talk about the cases of those where it hasn't gone so well or when those have gone well. Is there a particular case that comes to mind for you where a part of a country has wanted to secede and has done it successfully? And that, I think Scotland was something you're talking about. They haven't seceded yet, but it's maybe a good model for the Western Cape, for the Cape?
Yeah, so I love the example of Scotland, and actually the fact that Scotland voted not to leave doesn't make it any less
relevant
of a great example. Yeah, and that would be for me the gold standard. If you had anything you wanted to copy, that was how it should be. And Scotland actually is probably also the closest example to the Western Cape. So just for context, that the Scotland joined in a union which was instigated by the British, just as the Cape joined in a union instigated by the British, and both of them got devolved parliaments in the 90s. Both of them have populations of around about 6 million people, and both of them are governed by a party who, at a national level, who's a minority in the country. So there's a lot of parallels between the two. And then what happened in Scotland, which is very interesting, and it's the perfect example of how it should be done. And I wouldn't rule out that being the route that South Africa will go. I think it's a distinct possibility that, given even despite all of their faults, that South Africa could go this route. So in Scotland, there started to be a groundswell of opinion in favour of independence, much as is happening in the Cape. There was the Scottish National Party, and in 2010 they got 19.9% of the vote. So they were nowhere near a majority, but they were there and they were standing on a ticket of independence. And the government in Westminster, the UK government, recognised that there was a groundswell of opinion in favour of independence, and granted, although Scotland had no constitutional right to an independent to a referendum, they granted one anyway, and they passed the law to allow the referendum. And both sides agreed to respect the outcome of the referendum. They campaigned. There was no violence whatsoever. And ultimately, Scotland voted to remain. 45% voted to leave. 55% voted to stay. And then both sides respected the outcome of the election, and on we went. And had Scotland voted to leave, I don't think there's anybody that's suggesting that Scotland wouldn't now be an independent country. So that would be the perfect scenario of how it should be done. And in our scenario, wouldn't it be great if we could do some polling? We could recognise that there's a groundswell of opinion. We chat to the DA. The DA, as our elected government, go and have the conversation with the ANC, and there's an agreement that we'll hold a referendum and we'll accept the outcome of it, whatever it is. That would be the perfect scenario. And look, as you've said, the interesting thing with the ANC is they've got a long tradition of democracy, and they've got an incredibly high profile internationally. And obviously they are synonymous with fighting against minority rule and fighting for democracy of the majority. So for me, that is going to be a very, very difficult situation for the ANC to handle if we get evidence that the majority don't want to be in South Africa and don't want to be governed by the ANC. And you have to ask yourself, and I don't think they will. I'm probably in the minority, but is the ANC really willing on the world stage to enforce minority rule and as the minority party oppress a majority? And I think they would find that very, very difficult. I think there would be immense international pressure upon them were they to do that.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Phil. Folks are getting a little punch drunk and cheeky here in the chat, so I'm going to ask people to behave themselves. What's it? What's that, Phil?
I said go for it. It's fine.
No. They're not talking. They're not talking about you, Phil. They're people trolling each other. So I just asked people to knock that off. But I think Variable Vision asked a question here. He's kind of be cheeky. It's actually funny though. He says so. What Phil is saying is we should start wearing kilts, eating haggis, and showing our bright red bums to the ANC.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
I think that's good. What's this? Yeah, what I was going to say. So Phil, since we haven't had you on for video here, we're going to have to get you on again so that people actually can see you. Because when you listening to a phone conversation is one thing, but actually seeing a person's face, you get the earnestness of it, and the communication is more complete. So would you be willing to come back on as a guest at a later date?
Yes, I would. Yes.
Okay, so we'll do that. So what we're going to do here is I want to say, folks, and we got a big audience. I hate to turn off the audience, but people have things to do and probably kids to put to bed and dogs to feed and things like that. Wait a second. Harry says, can't you guys just move to Orania and join them? It looks like they already established themselves there. Well, the problem with that, Harry, is that Orania is an Afrikaans community. And if you're colored or Indian or black or white and you speak Afrikaans and you join them for their values, you can do that. But Orania is very different than the secession movement in Western Cape. It's not for Afrikaans or Afrikaners. It's for Western Cape Tonians. Does that make sense, Phil?
Yeah, 100%. Look, to be honest, I'm a person that's deeply intrigued by most things. So I, as an Englishman, you can imagine that I wasn't sure how welcome I would be, but I many years ago went and camped a night in Orania and had a look around. And look, it wouldn't be my cup of tea, but it was a very interesting place, remarkably well run, and completely different to what people would think. but not that I'm supporting Iran, I hasten to add, but I think they've got a right to do what they're doing, and I think they're doing it very well. But the bottom line is probably 10% of the Western Cape population is white and Afrikaans. So clearly there's a big difference, as you say, between what Iran is doing and what we want to do in the Western Cape. This is not about the 10% of the population. This is about 100% of the population.
And another key distinction is Irania is not seeking independence. They just want self-autonomy, which is they've largely have. And so they're living within the system, and they've agreed that they're willing to live within the system as long as they're allowed to pursue their own path, which the government has allowed them to do. So very stark distinction between what we're talking about with Irania and with the Western Cape.
One of my favourite stories to dine out on Irania, because most people talk about Irania. A lot of people do because it's kind of symbolic. And like often is the case, people haven't really got any idea of what the true facts are. Now, Irania is built on two sides of a main road that runs into the Free State from the Northern Cape, and there's a petrol station there which is part of Irania, and it's probably the only petrol station in the country where the majority of the staff are all white, clearly, and the majority of the customers are black. So it's probably the only petrol station in South Africa where white people serve black people on a regular basis.
Interesting. Well, Phil, let's see. We're coming up on 2 hours, so we're going to go ahead and cut it off here shortly. But I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I'm really disappointed that the network connection wouldn't let you come in by video, but eventually we got the voice, and people stay with us. And let you know, we peaked out at over 100 people watching the stream simultaneously, and we've had an audience north of 80 or 90 almost the entire stream. So clearly, this is a topic of great interest to people, even skeptics like Tertia. She stayed with us. She's listened to your arguments. She remains very skeptical based on her comments, but that's her prerogative. And I think it's interesting that people are curious about this topic. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the people that listened, and thank you, Tertia.
Yeah, so as Phil and I discussed ahead of time, and Phil was actually, I think, excited that I asked him to be on the program because I am a skeptic as well. And I think he didn't want just sycophants to go, yeah, Phil, that's a brilliant idea. Please do it. Secession, it's wonderful. It's great. And obviously that's not exactly my view. So I think that was helpful. Would you agree, Phil, that it's good to have someone that's kind of not in opposition, but a counterbalance to a discussion?
Absolutely. What we need is debate, and you don't refine your position and you don't resolve issues if you're talking, if you're in an echo chamber. It's absolutely critical that people who are against it, but have intelligent arguments, sit in rooms of people that are for it, that have intelligent arguments, and then we have an intelligent discussion. So no, I would actually much rather be interviewed by somebody who didn't agree with me than somebody who did.
All right, well, Phil, thanks a lot. Folks, I'm going to say my closing remarks here. Phil, just stay on the line, and I'll chat with you afterwards if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Of course.
All right, so Phil's going to hang on there. Just don't move any paper in the background. And no, it's quite all right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. This is a topic that I was reticent to bring up, not because I'm afraid to talk about it. I'll talk about any topic, I have nothing to hide here. I'm happy to discuss it. But I was reticent because I thought that it was premature to discuss it, but the interest in this topic has picked up, if not arithmetically, maybe exponentially in the past couple of months. And so I also didn't know anybody who was working on this. And so Phil was introduced to me by a third party, and I'm grateful to that third party for doing it, which made this possible. So my thanks to my guest today, Phil Craig. We're going to have Phil back on, and hopefully he'll have real internet connection, not relying on Cell C or whatever he's using for his connection there. And we'll get him on video. But I think it's been a very interesting discussion. And however you come down on the issue of whether it's legal, it's right, it's moral, or it's appropriate of secession, people are talking about Cape secession now. And it's not just in dark corners, in a vineyard in Stellenbosch or Franschhoek. People are talking about it all over, and not just in the Western Cape, but around South Africa, and even outside South Africa. So, folks, pay attention to the topic. If you've got questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. Those of you who subscribed to my channel today during the stream, thank you so much. I'm very grateful for that. This channel has grown exponentially from just 2 subscribers in February to well over 3,000 now, and we're moving north of that. So thank you so much. And to my loyal subscribers and loyal viewers who come in on a lot of these streams, thank you so much. The moderators, thank you for doing a fine job for today's stream. And just don't be overzealous, but thank you for doing a good job on that. And to those who offered the super stickers and the super chats, Elizabeth did a few of those. Thank you so much for that. That money will be put to good use. Appreciate the donations to the channel. It is most appreciated. And thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been, I think, one of the more interesting chats we've had. And so I may do a live stream later today, but it's not going to be a long one, folks. If I do it, I'll do it for an hour. It's Sunday night. I don't think people in South Africa want to be up that late tonight. They want to get some rest because apparently some people can go back to work now. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Indaba Africa. This has been Chris in Central Pennsylvania. I wish you all the very best. I'm going to close you out with my... Well, it's not straight voltage, but I'm just going to close out off the camera, and we'll catch you perhaps later today. Certainly tomorrow. Tomorrow, I almost forgot. Don't let me do that. Shame on me. Bad host. Tomorrow, I have a special feature again because this is when she was available. And my guest tomorrow is Unati Kwaza, who's from the Western Cape. She's a businesswoman, and she's also a member of the Institute of Race Relations. And so that should be a fascinating discussion. She's got a lot of Twitter followers and a big following in South Africa, among other places. So please tune in tomorrow. That will be 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here in the U.S. or at 1700, 5 p.m. for you civilians out there in Habaroti and in Johannesburg and Cape Town. So that's 11 in the U.S. on the East Coast and 5 p.m. in Botswana and South Africa, 4 p.m. in Windhoek and Abuja and London. Anyway, please tune in tomorrow for Unati Kwaza. Should be a fascinating discussion. I look forward to it. I hope you guys can join us for that. And once again, I may do a live stream later tonight. But in the meantime, feel free to slide over from this live stream to go to Herman Ru's testing out his live stream channel. It should be entertaining. Feel free to give him a hard time. Help him work through it. It ought to be entertaining. If you want to have a crack on a Sunday, go ahead and check it out because Herman will be doing what I've done at testing his channel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, for your patronage, for your super chats, for your comments, your questions.